There's a single moment, just one sentence, where Arnold says something so raw, so real, that Whoopi couldn't speak. Not a word. You'll know it when it happens. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. It didn't begin with applause. It began with tension. A live studio, a worn medal, and the moment a man made of iron reminded the world that steel rusts, but memory doesn't. There was no laughter at first. Just that kind of silence that wraps around a room like thick fog, pregnant, pressurized, waiting. The kind of silence that happens right before something breaks. Arnold Schwarzenegger sat slightly off-center beneath the bright stage lights of The View. The lights glared, but they didn't touch his eyes. His posture was upright, almost statuesque. His jacket was plain, charcoal gray, unbuttoned just enough to reveal something glinting beneath it, barely. A tarnished medal, half hidden, old enough to look like it belonged in a museum. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. Its weight was already speaking. Across from him, Whoopi Goldberg leaned back in her chair with a grin too wide to feel real. Her voice was sweet, but it carried something sharper underneath. "So, Arnold," she said, cocking her head, "you still carrying that little war medal around? I thought the Cold War ended decades ago." Laughter followed, not loud, just testing. The kind that waits for permission to grow bolder. Arnold didn't move. He didn't blink. He just looked at her. Not with anger. Not even with judgment. Just presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need to raise its voice to quiet a room. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached into his jacket and pulled the medal free from beneath the collar. It was small, dented, its ribbon frayed at the edges. But in his hand, it looked like something sacred. "This," he said, voice low and calm, with that unmistakable Austrian grit, "belonged to my father." The laughter stopped instantly. Not faded. Stopped. He looked down at the medal, then back up. He fought in a war that gave him nothing. He died in a village that forgot his name. But he wore this when he carried bricks on his back to feed a family with no future. The studio didn't go quiet. It collapsed into silence. Someone in the back row cleared their throat, too loud. One of the camera operators broke focus for a moment. A producer mouthed toward the control booth, "Cut?" The director shook their head. "Let it roll." Arnold didn't fill the pause. He let it live. He held the medal gently, not like it was made of metal, but of memory. Of things that should have never been erased. "I wear it," he said, finally, "not to honor war, but because my father never got the ending he deserved. And sometimes, wearing what hurt us the most, is the only way we know we survived it." No one moved. No one spoke. Even the lights felt too bright now. Whoopi shifted in her seat, reaching for a smile but not finding one. "Well," she said, voice thin, "that got serious fast." But the moment had shifted. The room was no longer a studio. It was a courtroom. A church. A graveyard. Arnold wasn't here to spar. He wasn't here to impress. He was here to carry something the world had long buried. And that truth had just landed with more force than any punch he ever threw. 2 days earlier, the invitation had landed without fanfare. Just a subject line. No emojis. No fanfare. The View would be honored to host Mr. Schwarzenegger for a discussion on legacy, masculinity, and American values. Arnold read it once. Then again. He didn't reply. Instead, he stood by the window of his modest office in Santa Monica. Nothing like the marble mansions people imagined. No trophies. No gold records. Just old iron dumbbells in the corner and a framed black and white photo of his father laying bricks in post-war Austria. His assistant, Kara, hovered nearby. Young, loyal, always one step ahead. But this time, even she hesitated. "They don't want to talk legacy," she said, cautious. "They want to provoke." He didn't answer. She held out the printed email anyway. "It's a trap, Arnold. They're hoping you bring the old headlines, the affairs, the scandals, the baggage. So they can wrap it in applause and call it empowerment." Still, he said nothing. His hand reached down to the floor beside his desk. A small canvas bag rested there, worn and discolored, the stitching frayed around the zipper. It looked like something a factory worker might have carried to lunch. But he knew every thread. From inside, he pulled out an old pair of weightlifting shoes. Brown leather, cracked at the toe, laces permanently curled. He held one up. "These," he said quietly, "were the shoes I wore the week my father died." Kara stopped breathing. He didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the shoe, as if it still remembered the ground he'd walked. "I was training in Munich. Squats. Deadlifts. Routine. I got the call between sets." He paused. "I didn't cry. Didn't fly home. I went back into the gym. And I lifted. Until my body stopped shaking." He ran his thumb over the cracked sole. "Grief didn't need an audience," he added. "It needed gravity." Kara sat down slowly, the reality of his quiet unraveling something in her. She'd never heard this story. Not from him. Not from anyone. Arnold placed the shoe gently back in the bag, then zipped it up. "I'll go," he said. "Why?" she asked. "Why walk into a room where they'll mock your past and twist your words?" He looked at her finally. Not with bravado. But with something deeper. Something earned. "Because someone out there," he said, "someone watching that show, is carrying something they think they're supposed to hide. And maybe if they see me carry mine, without shame, it'll make their load feel just a little lighter." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. By morning, the whispers had already started. Why is Arnold going on The View? Is this damage control? He's too old school. He won't survive. He read none of it. Instead, he sat in the back of a black sedan as it rolled through the city. The same streets that once shouted his name on marquees now barely noticed. The bag sat beside him. The shoes inside. The medal under his collar. He didn't rehearse. No publicist-approved soundbites. No comeback lines. He wasn't coming to be liked. He was coming because some stories aren't for applause. They're for the people who need to know they're not alone. And the truth. It doesn't need to shout. Sometimes, it just walks into the room wearing old shoes, carrying silence like armor. The red light blinked again. The cameras were rolling. The co-hosts smiled wider, but it didn't reach their eyes this time. Something had shifted. The air in the studio was no longer playful. It was heavy now, taut with the tension of unsaid things. Arnold sat still, his hands resting calmly on his knees. The medal hung faintly visible near his collarbone, no longer hidden. The room hadn't relaxed since he'd shown it. If anything, it had gone quieter. Whoopi leaned forward again. Her tone had changed. It was still wrapped in charm, but the edge underneath was sharper now. Like she wasn't sure who had control anymore, and wanted it back. "So, Arnold," she said, dragging out his name, "you've played soldiers, machines, governors, even a pregnant man, if I recall." Some laughter bubbled through the audience. Trained, not spontaneous. "But now," she continued, voice light but loaded, "you walk in here with a war medal and talk about grief like you're a priest. Are we supposed to believe this is the real you?" The laugh cue hit. Bigger this time. But less certain. Arnold didn't move. He didn't even blink. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he reached down to the floor beside his chair and lifted the small canvas bag. He placed it gently on the table between them. Unzipping it, he pulled out the weightlifting shoes. Old. Faded. Leather curled at the edges. They looked fragile, like something left behind in a forgotten locker room. But in his hands, they felt monumental. "These," he said softly, "are the shoes I wore the week my father passed away." The laughter vanished. He held one in his palm like it still carried weight. He was a man broken by war. Not because he lost a battle, but because he lost what came after. Dignity. Purpose. Hope. He died working construction with his back bent and his name forgotten. He paused. "I wear this medal not for patriotism. And I carry these shoes not for nostalgia. I carry them because some stories never got their ending. You could feel the silence pulse. The kind of stillness where even the lights felt too loud. The audience leaned forward, instinctively, as if being pulled by something older than curiosity. Whoopi raised an eyebrow, trying to reclaim the rhythm. So now you're here to inspire people, she said. The Terminator, with a conscience. Another ripple of laughter. But it didn't spread. Arnold's gaze never left hers. I'm not here to perform, he said quietly. And I'm not ashamed of what I carry. He looked around the room now. Not at the cameras. At the people. The faces. I've spent decades pretending. For film. For politics. For survival. But grief, real grief, doesn't fit a script. The audience had stopped smiling. I remember squatting 400 pounds in these shoes, he said, voice slow, deep. The same day I found out he was gone. And I remember thinking, if I don't keep lifting, I'll collapse. He placed the shoes down on the table. But the weight wasn't just on the bar. It was inside me. Whoopi leaned back slightly, her smile frozen in place, unsure if it still belonged there. Arnold didn't gloat. He didn't escalate. He just let it hang. I didn't come here to rewrite my story, he said. I came because I know what it's like to feel like the only one carrying something heavy. The lights caught the medal again, glinting just enough to be seen. People don't need heroes, he added. They need proof that survival isn't always loud. And in that moment, the studio wasn't a stage anymore. It was a mirror. For the viewers. For the audience. For the co-hosts who suddenly found their cue cards a little too flimsy. Whoopi cleared her throat. She was smiling again, but it was thinner now. Well, she said, forcing levity, that got deep fast. Arnold nodded. Pain doesn't wait for the right time. And just like that, the second round ended, not with applause, not with laughter, but with a realization. He wasn't here to win a segment. He was here to unearth something too long buried. And now that it had surfaced, no one in the room knew quite what to do with it. The shoes sat untouched on the table. No one spoke. Arnold leaned back slightly, not to rest, but to let the weight of the moment settle. He had said what needed saying. And now, it wasn't about him. It was about what the room would do with what he'd laid down. The silence stretched long enough for the studio team to consider cutting to commercial. A producer raised a hand. Then it happened. A chair creaked in the far left corner of the audience. Quiet, but out of place. Everyone turned instinctively. An older man was standing. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Denim jacket, silver stubble, shoulders stiff like they hadn't fully relaxed in years. His hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from age or memory. The studio froze. This wasn't planned. No producer had prepped this. No segment cue card covered this. The man's voice cracked, but he didn't wait for permission. He's not here to inspire, the man said, eyes fixed on Arnold. He's here because he never left. Arnold turned his head, calm, still. The man took one slow step forward. Munich. 1970. I was a janitor at the old gym in Schwabing. Just sweeping floors, wiping down benches. You could feel the oxygen shift. He paused, letting the memory surface. Arnold came in at 5 a.m. every day. No entourage. No press. Just him and a duffel bag. He didn't talk much. Didn't need to. But every time he finished, he'd nod at me. Say thank you. Offer to help put the weights back. A few audience members looked at Arnold differently now. Not as an icon. As someone once invisible, doing small things when no one watched. One morning, the man continued, my car broke down. I was late. He was already lifting. I apologized. Said I'd had a rough night. He swallowed. My son was sick. Fever of 104. My wife had left 3 months earlier. I didn't know how I was gonna make rent. The man's voice shook now, but he didn't stop. Arnold didn't say much. Just looked at me, and said, I'll be here every day. If you need to talk, you know where to find me." He chuckled softly. I thought it was just small talk. But he stayed after every workout for a week. Just sitting there, on the bench, waiting. In case I wanted to talk. A murmur passed through the room, not noise, just emotional current. That was the first time in my life someone looked at me like I mattered. The man's eyes glistened. People think the only strength he had was in his arms. But the truth is, he never needed to lift anything to carry people. Arnold hadn't moved. His hands were folded in his lap, head bowed slightly. Not in shame. In respect. The man took one breath. Then another. "I lost my son in Iraq," he said. 15 years ago. Never talked about it. Couldn't. He looked straight at Arnold. But seeing someone carry grief without pretending it's over. That matters. A pause hung in the air, thick and fragile. The man sat back down slowly, his knees creaking louder than any applause. No one dared fill the space. The co-hosts sat still. The cameras didn't cut. The audience leaned forward, not in shock, but in recognition. It didn't feel like television anymore. It felt like truth had walked into the room and refused to leave. Arnold finally looked up, eyes meeting the man's across the space. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just placed a hand gently on the old weightlifting shoe beside him. It wasn't a gesture for the cameras. It was a vow. Quiet. Unspoken. Some pain doesn't heal when ignored. It only softens when witnessed. And for the first time in years, someone had stood up not to challenge him, but to carry the memory with him. Together. The studio hadn't moved. The older man's words still hovered in the air, untouched. No one clapped. No one reached for a clever line. Even Whoopi sat quieter now, her cards loose in her lap, gaze unfixed. Arnold hadn't said anything since the man sat down. He didn't need to. His silence had done something few expected. It made room. And that room didn't stay empty for long. From somewhere near the middle section, another sound broke the stillness. Softer this time. A breath caught in the throat. Then a chair scraped back. All heads turned. It was a young man, early 20s, maybe younger. Hoodie pulled tight, fingers twisting the edge of the sleeves like they were trying to hold him together. He stood slowly, as if unsure whether his legs would cooperate. Arnold turned toward him. The young man didn't ask to speak. He just began. "I used to believe in people," he said, voice cracking right out of the gate. "I used to think there was a reason for stuff. That pain meant something. That hard things built strong people." A few audience members shifted. No one spoke. "But then my dad died," the kid said. "And everything I believed in just fell apart." He swallowed hard. It wasn't heroic. He didn't go in a war. He didn't save anyone. He worked 12-hour shifts at a warehouse and died of heart failure before he turned 45. The confession wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real, messy, stumbling, true. "I watched my mom work 2 jobs to keep the lights on. And people just kept moving. Nobody paused. Nobody carried it with her. They just said, 'That's life.'" He looked directly at Arnold now. "And then I see you sit there, with a war medal no one gave you, with shoes so old they barely hold together, and you don't sell anything. You don't defend anything. You just sit there. With it. All of it." The room inhaled, one of those silent, sacred breaths that can only happen when something breaks open. "I don't know if I believe in anything right now," the young man said. "Faith. Country. Even people. I don't know." He wiped at his cheek. There wasn't shame in the motion. Just weariness. "But right now," he continued, "watching this, I kind of want to try again." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. He sat down slowly, as if afraid the moment might shatter under him. But it didn't. The audience didn't erupt. They didn't applaud. They leaned in, eyes softer, walls lower. Arnold stayed where he was. But his body shifted. For the first time that day, He rose. No grand movement. No cue from the producers. Just a man standing for someone who had just cracked open his soul in front of strangers. He didn't walk straight to the boy. He stopped 2 rows away. Then he looked at him, not as a celebrity, not as a symbol, but as someone who had once stood where he stood. You don't need to believe everything right now, Arnold said gently. But the fact that you stood up means you already started. The kid looked down, but you could see his shoulders exhale. Arnold turned toward the audience. He didn't raise his voice, but something in it carried deeper now, lower, fuller, grounded. I didn't come here to fix anything, he said. I came because sometimes, someone out there needs to see a man still carrying his weight. He looked toward the back of the room, not searching, just acknowledging. I didn't lose my father in a blaze of glory. I lost him to silence. And I lived a long time thinking if I just got strong enough, I wouldn't feel it anymore. He looked down at the shoes again. But pain doesn't disappear when you lift more. Sometimes, it gets heavier the longer you carry it. No one moved. No one dared. Arnold stepped back to his seat but didn't sit. He let the shoes rest between him and the crowd. No longer just objects. No longer just memories. Now, anchors. And still, he didn't try to conclude the moment. He didn't close it with a quote or a punchline. He just stood there. With the pain. With the kid. With all of it. And that silence. It didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the start of something that didn't need a name. The studio was holding its breath. The boy had sat down. Arnold remained standing. And the silence between them felt less like a pause, and more like a thread connecting generations. The co-hosts didn't move. Even Whoopi, so practiced in the rhythms of live TV, sat still. Her fingertips touched her cue cards, but they didn't flip. There was nothing left on them that belonged to this moment. Then, without warning, it happened. The massive studio screen behind them, typically used for graphics or sponsor bumpers, flickered once. It was supposed to be blank. Instead, white text faded into view over a black background. No sound. No cue. Just 6 lines of words, rendered in stark simplicity. I'm a Marine. I lost my best friend in Afghanistan. I was going to end things tonight. But watching Arnold carry pain like it's not weakness, maybe I'll wait one more day. The entire room gasped. Not loud, but unified. Like the oxygen had vanished from the space and returned all at once. A few people turned toward the control booth, expecting a frantic cut to commercial. But no one moved. Behind the glass, the director simply stared at the monitor, hand frozen on the console. The words didn't scroll. They just hung there. Unfiltered. Unplanned. Sacred. Arnold turned slowly to face the screen. His body didn't react dramatically. He didn't gasp. He didn't flinch. But something shifted in his posture. He stood straighter, not with pride, but with presence. As if some quiet gravity had just settled into his bones. He didn't speak right away. The co-hosts said nothing. Even Whoopi had gone completely still. Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. Arnold looked at the screen like he wasn't reading it, but listening to it. And somehow, everyone in the room knew, he wasn't seeing pixels. He was seeing a man. Somewhere out there. Alone. On the edge. He stepped forward. Just once. No spotlight. No music. No cue from the floor manager. He just took a single step, toward the screen, toward the silence, toward whoever was out there watching. If you're seeing this, Arnold said, voice low but firm, I don't know your name. I don't know where you are. But I know what it feels like when the pain fills the whole room. He paused. And the pause wasn't empty. It ached. I carried this medal, he said, touching his chest, not because it made me look strong, but because it reminded me that someone I loved didn't get the chance to keep going. His hand dropped to his side. But you still have that chance. No one moved. Even the cameras, usually robotic and fluid, seemed to pause in place, as if afraid to intrude. You don't have to believe in me, Arnold continued. You don't even have to believe in hope. Just believe in this. The fact that you're still breathing means you haven't lost yet. He let that hang. Not like a sound bite. Like a lifeline. Don't leave the world, he said, eyes fixed on the lens now. Not until you've punched back at least once. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't a performance. It was a direct message to a man who might have been seconds away from disappearing. And somehow, Arnold had reached him first. A stillness fell over the studio that felt untouchable, holy. Like grief had just been held, not dissected. Like pain had found a shape that didn't need to be hidden anymore. Whoopi blinked hard. Her hand went to the glass of water on her table, but she didn't lift it. She just held it. Like an anchor. Like she wasn't sure what else to do with her hands. No one spoke. In the lighting rig above, a crew member was quietly wiping his face. In the wings, a sound tech took off her headset and closed her eyes. It didn't feel like a studio anymore. It felt like church. Or maybe like a battlefield after the bullets stopped, but before anyone moved. The screen faded slowly to black. No outro. No applause. No credits. Just a blank wall where a man's cry for help had appeared, and been heard. Arnold stepped back, not dramatically, just enough to return to the table. He placed the weightlifting shoes gently beside the medal. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. He just looked out at the audience. And for the first time in hours, the crowd wasn't watching a show. They were witnessing survival. And not the loud kind. Not the kind with fireworks or slogans. But the kind that happens when one man's silence gives someone else permission to stay alive. The words were gone. The screen had faded to black. The silence remained. Not awkward. Not empty. Just full. Arnold stood beside the table. The shoes and the medal rested between him and the audience like relics of something too sacred to name. He didn't touch them anymore. They no longer needed to be held to be seen. Whoopi hadn't moved. She sat back slightly now, hands resting over her note cards like they were blank. As if the script she'd written for this segment had crumbled in her lap without anyone noticing. But she noticed. She looked at Arnold, not with her usual grin or practiced sharpness, but with something quieter. Something she hadn't worn on camera in a very long time. She cleared her throat. So what now? She asked, voice lower, like she wasn't sure how loud she should be. You come in here with old shoes and war medals, and suddenly you're a spiritual guide. It wasn't sarcasm. Not fully. It was the last gasp of a familiar rhythm. One more swing at control. Arnold didn't react. He didn't take the bait. He just looked at her, eyes steady, unmoved, and said, I didn't bring stories. I brought what was real. The tension in the air coiled again, but not with conflict. With truth. With reckoning. Come on, Whoopi leaned forward, her voice hardening. You've spent decades playing machines, mercenaries, men who never cry. You made millions pretending pain doesn't hurt. And now you want us to believe you're just some guy who never stopped feeling it. Arnold didn't answer right away. He waited. Let the dust settle. Then, quietly, grief doesn't go away just because the camera stopped rolling. A few heads in the audience nodded, slow. Arnold looked down for a moment at the shoes, then back up. I'm not clinging to pain, he said, voice even. I'm carrying it. Because pretending it didn't happen, that would be the performance. That landed harder than anything he'd lifted in his prime. Whoopi blinked. She opened her mouth to reply, then closed it. For the first time, it didn't feel like her show. The format had split down the middle, and she was no longer the one shaping it. She looked at her co-hosts, searching for backup. But one of them, a younger woman, normally quiet, spoke first. He's not wrong, she said softly. Whoopi glanced at her, then back at Arnold. Her smile had faded completely. What remained wasn't surrender, but something adjacent. Disarmament. Arnold leaned forward slightly. I didn't come here to fight, he said. But that doesn't mean I came here to stay silent. The room didn't move. The cameras didn't shift. For the first time in years, No one mistook him for the Terminator. No one mistook the shoes for props. No one mistook the silence for hesitation. And no one mistook the pain for performance. Whoopi looked down at her note cards again. They felt useless now. Like instructions for a story that no longer applied. She spoke without looking up. "I didn't mean to mock you," she said. The words came slowly, like they'd been hiding behind years of armor. "Sometimes, we get so good at talking, we forget how to listen." Arnold nodded. "Once. We all do." A long pause followed. Not one person reached for their phone. Not one audience member shuffled in their seat. The moment had stopped being a segment. It had become something else. Something no one could name, but everyone felt. Arnold picked up the medal. Rolled it gently between his fingers, not like jewelry, but like prayer beads. "You know what I realized," he said, voice lower now, not performing, confiding. "It's not that people are afraid of pain. They're afraid of being the only ones feeling it." He looked out over the room. Then he lifted one of the shoes. Just one. Held it out, not high, just steady. "I used to think this made me strong," he said. That carrying it was the answer. But it wasn't the shoe. It wasn't the weight. He looked at Whoopi. It was remembering that the fight didn't end just because I got tired. Then, he reached across the table and gently placed the shoe in her hands. She stared at it, unsure what to do. As if he had just handed her a history she didn't feel worthy to hold. "You don't have to believe what I believe," he said gently. "Just don't laugh at what kept some of us alive." From off camera, a staffer wiped away tears. Another voice near the lighting rig whispered, "That's the realest thing I've ever seen." Arnold stood. He looked at the audience. Still standing. Still silent. And gave a nod, not for applause, but as if recognizing them. Not as viewers, but as witnesses. He turned to Whoopi one last time. "I didn't come here to be understood," he said. "I came to remind people, it's okay to feel. Even when the world tells you not to." He didn't shake hands. Didn't wave. He just walked. Through the silence. Through the lights. Through the space that used to be a studio. Now something else entirely. And when he reached the edge of the stage, he paused. Then, without turning back, he said, just loud enough for the room to hear, "Sometimes, you don't need to win the round. You just need to stay standing." The screen faded to black. No outro music. No applause. Just a single still image of the weightlifting shoes resting beside the medal. And beneath it, the caption that would echo across the internet by nightfall, "Strength isn't loud. It endures."